Hey everybody, I am about to show you a tutorial here for DCS Retribution 1.0. A lot of you have probably watched my video about DCS Liberation 6.0 and those tutorials. Retribution is a fork of Liberation, and they do a great job. They reached out to our group. I'm part of We Run Liberation. Uh, we have unique needs, and we have over 300 members. We run PvE events every week. And people that are running Retribution, they came out, approached us, and said, "Hey, what are some things that we can fix, change, or make better?" So over time, we've been working on this in the background, and they finally got to a point where they wanted to release 1.0. A lot of it is just like Liberation, but there are some quality of life upgrades. The other thing I never really covered in my tutorial was all the way from the beginning, like somebody who's never used it. So if you're brand new, never used it, don't know what this is, you need to go to the description of this video and grab this link. This will take you to the DCS Retribution page on GitHub. You can read through some of the things that they've got here. Okay, and they've got links to their Discord if you want to talk to them there. Over here, you're going to find the releases, and right now it's currently the 1.0 releases. So you just download this zip file here. Once you have that zip file, you're going to put it somewhere. Right click, I have 7-zip. I extract it to its own folder, and it's installed. It's something that runs out of its own folder. You don't have to run an installer or anything like that. Once it's open, you scroll down and you look for Retribution main. This is the executable that'll open it up. So we'll run it, and you should have a blank screen when it comes up. Mine probably will pull one of my last saves, which it did. So yours will probably just be blank. There's also a possibility that you could be really zoomed into the water and you don't know why. Just remember this is a map, so you can zoom way out and try to find out where the mission is if that ever happens to you. One of the things that you're going to want to do is go up here to your preferences. Make sure that you set your save game directory and your installation directory. Once you have that, hit apply and you're good to go. One other thing that you'll have to do if you haven't played this before is in your DCS Retribution folder under Resources and Scripts, there is a mission scripting.lua. You just copy and paste that over here to your scripts. This is the backup if you ever need your original one. You would just rename this and get rid of original and then copy that back over. That allows Retribution to do everything it needs to do to pull the data back and complete your mission. So just make sure you got all of that set up before you try to do anything. Now, once you got this up, you're probably wondering what everything does. If you're ever concerned, just hover over some of these options here, and it'll tell you what they do. The first one that you want to mess with is New Game. When you click on New Game, it's going to open up this New Game wizard, and it lets you pick a campaign. Now, my group, Rerun Liberation, I make all of our campaigns. The Retribution team has been kind enough to include my campaigns into their 1.0 release. So everything with WRL is one of my campaigns. So I've got 5 of them here. When you click on one, you're going to have the author name. You're going to have the factions that are with it. I also have a couple of our own custom task force factions. They have included that. They also were nice enough to add a link to our website if you ever want to join us or take a look at our PvE group. We're pretty casual. We don't run things like a squadron. And it's just show up and fly and have a good time for the time that you have. There's a little button down here called Showing Compatible Campaigns. As the versions of Retribution get developed, there's some changes to how campaigns are made or how certain things work. And it's up to the campaign makers to go ahead and update those and submit them to the Retribution team. So if you're used to Liberation or you have a certain campaign you throw in here and you can't find it, you can always hit show incompatible. It doesn't necessarily mean that campaign is not going to work. It just means that that particular campaign hasn't been verified to work with the latest standards. So what we're going to do is we're going to just pick one of my campaigns here. We got the Kutaisi de Vaziani. This performance impact is set by the mission designer on how much they think it's going to hurt your machine to try to run it. Most people have the best results running this on a completely dedicated server and not the one that they game on. Personally, I can run a pretty decent mission on my machine and play it solo, but for our campaigns, when we run it with our group, we have a dedicated server that we run it on. These options here, invert map, I would tell you just never use that. Unless the campaign specifically says in the description somewhere that it's designed to work that way, what this does is it inverts the default red and blue spawns. So you can play the map backwards, essentially. Uh, if it's not set up for that, you may have complications, and it's just not, in my opinion, it's not even worth having. The second setting here is advanced IADs. This is with Skynet. This is also set by the mission designer. So if they put in the extra work to have command posts, comm towers, power plants, this will be checked. And if you don't use Skynet, you won't notice anything. Uh, if you don't know what Skynet is, we're going to get to that in the settings options. So if this box is checked, just leave it checked. It's not going to cause any problems. If the mission designer puts a certain time frame to start the mission, it'll automatically be in this calendar. So my mission, I told it October 22nd, 21. So here it is. But you can change this. You can change to these different presets, which can be tied into weapon restrictions as well. And I'll show you that option as we get to it. So personally, if let's say you wanted a winter campaign instead of October, you could just do modern winter. Or if you want a summer campaign, spring, whatever you want. So we're going to just do modern summer. Since I already hit use preset, it already changed the calendar. So once we got all this set up, we're going to hit next. Now this is where the factions come in. The campaign designer automatically sets the default factions and they should pop up here. Now, just a word of warning, if you back out of this and then go forward again, it will default. See how it changed the factions? So if you forget what the default ones are, you can just click on this campaign again. You see how it reset the time and it also reset the factions. This is just a brief overview screen showing what that campaign designer has put into the faction. It does not mean this is everything that's going to be in the mission. So you can see all the different aircraft that are possibly available, all the different frontline units that are possibly available, artillery and air defenses. Well, like I said, this is not necessarily what's going to be in the mission. This is just what's in the faction that the mission designer can pull from. If you want to play as a different faction, you can. You can scroll and pick something different. Just be aware that the mission designer has a reason that they use certain factions, so you may get different results the way if you play with some other faction. Once you get to the generation settings, this is where you can set all your mods. So if you have the high digit SAM pack, or you want to fly the F-22 Raptor, as long as it's the version that is supported, you just check the box, and you'll be able to put those aircraft in. These general settings here, you can turn off aircraft carriers, the LHA. Typically, the only one I use is a super carrier module. And of course, that's only if a map has a carrier on it. And this particular campaign does not, so it really doesn't matter if I check that box or not, it won't do anything. This desired mission duration is a little misleading. So missions are based on time on target. So you can see in this area on the left here, I've got a cast flight with a time on target 30 minutes. That means 30 minutes from this time, they're expected to be on target. So 13:30, they'd be on target. This desired mission duration sets the AI auto planner. I highly recommend you always move it to 30 minutes. What that does is it makes all the auto time on targets between the red side, the enemy, and your side be under 1 hour. Now, like I said, this is just for the auto planner. So what you want to do is set this to 30 so that your mission time is about an hour. If you had it at default 60, that means that an hour and a half or longer will be the time on target. So you would have to fly that long in a mission just to see all the enemy flights get up in the air. Typically, most people think an hour is a decent amount of time to fly. So once you're done with these settings, you hit next. These are the income options. The mission designer can also set these, and you could set them even more. If you want an easy time, you set your income multiplier to that. You set your starting budget to 5,000. You're good to go. These player assists are for those that really don't want to micromanage anything. This will automate the purchases of your aircraft. This will automate the purchases of your frontline units and your runway repairs, which only happens if an enemy bombs your runway. And I've never had that happen. There's too much air, too much SAMs. So we'll check all these so you see what happens. Typically for me, I don't check any of these. I rather do it manually. So we'll hit next, and it says finish to start a new game. When you hit finish, this will pop up the squadron window. The mission designer can set this up. So however this is set up with the default factions that they wanted is how they intended you to play the game. Well, let's say you're looking through here and it's like, hey, I want to fly the Ka-50, but I didn't upgrade to the next Ka-50. So what you can do is you can add squadron. You find the old Ka-50. You pick what airbase you want it to be at, and you hit accept. And now you got the old Ka-50 in here. And you can hit remove squadron to get rid of that. Now, some other things to notice is the mission type. So let's say this MI8. You don't want it to go on the front line and do CAS. You don't want it to do that. You don't want to do the battlefield interdiction. You don't want to do that either because you just want these guys to transport and do air assault. That way they don't die. And this refers to the auto planner. This is not for you manually doing it. It does not allow, like, I won't be able to sign this as CAS manually, but also the AI won't plan it for CAS. You could change the liveries here as well. Let's say there's a skin that you really like maybe you want the army gray skin. And you can change what base they spawn at. But like I said, the mission designer pretty much does this the way that they want. Some designers go all out with the skins. Like this one's set to U.S. Navy. That's something that I put in the mission designer as a mission designer. But you can change all this stuff. You can also type in players' names here, and they'll pop up in the list. So we're gonna try this because I don't normally do this because it's a lot of work to type in, 20 guys' names, and it's just for that aircraft. So we typed it in for the Huey. We'll see how that goes. And then you got the red side. Let's say you think these MiG-23s are just gonna be too hard on you. Well, you can just get rid of them. Or you could change them out. You could say, well, let's just make another MiG-21 slot, and you can put them at an enemy air base, and there you go. Now, when you click on MiG-21s, they're set to 2 different air bases. And these liveries don't actually make a whole lot of sense, right? Afghanistan and Caucasus. So you could give them a Georgia skin. You can change it up however you want. Any way that you want it, you can make it that way. And once you're done messing with the squadrons, this is the only opportunity to make changes. You cannot come back in here and edit this. Once you hit accept, you're done. You have to do a new game wizard all over again just to change any of this. So, now that you've generated your mission, it brings you in. I'll remind you again, like I did at the beginning, sometimes people find themselves zoomed into the water and they start doing one of these numbers like my screen's black. What happened? So just scroll wheel out, zoom out, and you'll find yourself somewhere and you can zoom back in. So before you do anything else, there are still extra settings to mess with. This gear icon is the settings. So you click on that. You can resize this window. The first tab is the difficulty tab. By default, they set this to high. The reason being is that this level of AI at minimum seems to do the proper work that you ask them. So just keep them on high. If you want them even harder, you can go excellent. You can change your income sliders here. This is the income multiplier. So if you don't think the enemy's making enough money or you don't think you're making enough money per turn, you can change that. This player pilot cannot be killed. This is where the actual pilot themselves in the air wing can't be killed if they're a player. So if you're not a really good pilot, you might want to leave that checked. Man pads on the front lines, you can uncheck that so the random man pads don't spawn. It's really hard on the AI if you leave those on because the AI are not the best already, and a random chance at man pads, well, that's going to shoot a lot of aircraft down. This is a nice feature that's different now is the night day mission options. You can have generate night and day missions, generate only day, or generate only night. A lot of people, for starters, probably want to do generate day only until they get their bearings on how everything works in this game. The in-game labels, I typically put it to neutral dot. That allows for a tiny little black dot instead of the colored dots. Reason being is we have all types that play with us, and people with VR or disabilities, sometimes that neutral dot helps a lot. The map visibility options, this is your F10 options. Uh, I pretty much do Fog of War exclusively. That way you have some information, but you don't have all-seeing eye. External views is pretty straightforward as far as the F2 key. Easy comms and battle damage assessment. Battle damage assessment is that player window that pops up. It says, hey, you killed the Shilka, or hey, you killed the tank, and what percentage damage you did. And then easy comms just makes it so you don't have to tune to frequencies to talk to the DCS stuff. Once all that's set, you just come down here to campaign management. These options up top, the restrict weapons by date is based on the campaign date. So like I said, right now we're October 2021. So really, this option wouldn't do anything for us. Also, it's really work in progress. And if somebody really wanted to sit down and play with that a little more on the back end from like a coding perspective, they probably could. The spawn invulnerable AWACS and tankers, these are not needed. These are actually going to be removed pretty soon. In the early days, you couldn't tell the game to spawn an AWACS or a refueling flight like you can with CAS and TARCAP, stuff like that. So these were needed, they're not anymore. The pilot squadrons, this is pretty cool. The AI pilot leveling, this allows the AI to level up their difficulty if they survive sorties. It's up to you to leave that checked or not. The enable per squadron pilot limits, this is on by default now. And what this does is an enemy, let's say, or you for that matter, let's say you buy 16 aircraft. Well, you only have 12 pilots to go out there. And if those pilots die, you can't pilot aircraft without pilots. So the squadron replenishment rate is 4 per turn by default. And so what's cool is when you're going out and you're attacking an enemy air force and you're getting kills or you're taking losses, the next turn is heavily affected by that because now you have less people that are able to fly. This is another reason why on the difficulty section, player pilots can't be killed because then you won't contribute to the losses if you die in your aircraft. HQ automation down here is the automatic options that we set earlier. You can turn those off if you don't like them. The automatic package planning behavior. This is the friendly auto planner. So typically you would just leave it on no preference. If you personally didn't want them to plan a player slot, then you can put never assign player slots and you can do it manually. This is typically how I do it. They automatically generate packages players are ASAP. This is so players don't have to sit on a waiting screen until they can get into the cockpit. They can just sit in their aircraft. I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. This setting is to make players not be auto planned for stuff that needs to wait. And then automatically manage frontline stances. I usually turn that off, but we'll leave this on. This can change what your frontlines units do between turns automatically, and I'll show you how to do it manually later. Mission generator. This is some important stuff. This is kind of cool in regards to the mission timeline. So typically in older versions, you would have to sit on the ground at the beginning of the mission. Let's say it's 9 in the morning. So all the aircraft that are trying to start up and taxi are all getting congested, and you're just sitting there lagging away, hating life because you're in traffic. Well, you can do this fast forward to first contact, and then it will skip time when you hit this takeoff button and let you start later in the mission. So let's say instead of at 9 o'clock, you might start at 9:15, 9:20, 9:25. It all depends on when first contact is made with the enemy. That way, no simulation of death and stuff is happening. It all happens within the simulator itself. The player missions interrupt fast forward. I always do this at startup time because I want any player in the flight to have to start up and take off. Without this, that flight might be in the air and you might air start. So it's important to me to have it set up at start time. You could also have it taxi time. That means you probably start on the ramp hot. And then at takeoff time, you might actually start on the runway hot. So I don't really play with that much. I always do at startup time. The auto resolve combat during fast forward with the manual timeline options. It can simulate combat, but the losses are massive. It's very early stages. It's like step one of being a BMS style campaign where it can simulate attacks and deaths and all that. I never use this ever because I always do it at first contact. Super carrier module, you can have that checked. This one doesn't have a super carrier. It doesn't have a carry at all, so you don't have to worry about that. Put objective markers on the map. Those are those orange little circles that show up on the F10 map. I typically leave that by default. Generate dark kneeboard. That's pretty straightforward. Here's an important one. Player flights ignore time on target and spawn immediately. So if you have a player flight with a late time on target, they wouldn't be able to sit in their cockpit until their time that they should have to sit in the cockpit to do the startup. So I always check this box so that's not a factor. All my players can sit in the cockpit and they can make their decisions on when they're going to take off and go. Default start type, I always leave it as cold. Desired mission duration, this is where you can set that again to the 30 minutes if you forget. The max frontline length, this is new. Default is 80, but the mission designer can set it for you. Or through trial and error, you can change it here. So an 80 kilometer frontline length is huge. and units are scattered all across that. And for better or for worse, you just had to deal with it in the past. This is something that the Retribution team gave us and all of you to make your life better. As you play as a mission designer, you'll see where some missions, the front line is so long that it overlaps with bad terrain or it gets twisted, when it's making turns around different objectives, and it just doesn't make sense. So I prefer at least 30 or less for a condensed, crazy frontline fight. The performance options are the smoke effect on the front line. They'll have big plumes of black smoke so you know where the front line is. I don't really have any issues with that, so I've never turned it off. You can also have spacing. The higher number means less smoke. I always leave that. The SAM start in red alert mode means that, without Skynet, the SAMs are always on, they're always hot, they're ready to go and fire. The artillery strikes, this means the frontline units, the artillery, can fire back and forth. They'll have scheduled fire missions. You may find that you don't really care for the artillery strikes at all, or you want that tiny, tiny bit of performance by not having extra weapon calculations, you can turn that off. The moving ground units, this means that the frontline units, depending on their stance, will either move forward and attack or retreat. You can turn the moving units on or off, depending on how you feel about that. The convoy drive full distance between control points. So when you buy units, they have to drive from the factory to the front. And so this option here, disable convoys, overwrites any of these other options. It means that there won't actually be convoys generated from the factory in game. It can be a performance help, or if you just never attack these convoys, which are really hard to find sometimes, uh, that means just in between turns, those units will move to the front and they just won't be generated in the mission. I always prefer disable convoys. I asked for this setting to be in here. It's one of the things that Retribution gave us, and I really appreciate it. Something that they added was frontline troops prefer roads. So, any frontline troops that are near roads that can get them to their destination, they'll do that instead of try to navigate the horrible terrain. This maximum frontline unit per control point. So, the mission designer sets up ammo depots near bases to determine how many frontline units can spawn. And sometimes that can be a pretty high number. We're talking in the hundreds. So this, by default, overrides to make it at least down to 60. So if you're having performance problems or the front line is too big, you think there's too many units, you could lower it down so there can only be 25 per side. Just think of this number as how many frontline units maximum per side can spawn into your mission. Some of these other ones are pretty straightforward. Generate infantry squads. I always turn that off. I think infantry are overpowered right now, especially the helicopters. They also don't walk with the vehicles, so it's just kind of useless. And the carcasses for the units destroyed in previous turns. This can be cool. I don't know if there's a performance thing or not. I just prefer to turn it off. It doesn't really do anything for me to see blown up vehicles from prior turns. Here's another retribution option that's really awesome. Disable idle aircraft at airfields. So because Retribution has a mission option for OCA aircraft, meaning you can go and have a mission to destroy enemy aircraft still parked at the airbase. Any aircraft purchased sits static on the airbase, which we all know causes performance issues in DCS. You'll be sitting there trying to taxi, and it's just horrible performance because of all the aircraft. And think about it: if you got an airfield that can hold 70 aircraft, and you've purchased a ton of aircraft, all of them are sitting there eating up your frames. So I always check this because I never have an interest in trying to bomb the enemy aircraft on the runway, and they never do it to me. So it's just worth the performance to get that in there. So leave that checked. Calling of distant units, this is a pretty cool setting. It requires me to show you some things on the map. So we'll come back to that. We'll leave that checked, and typically I put something in here like 35. And this tells it not to call threatening SAM sites and do not call things around the carrier. But actually, I'll show that to you real quick. If we close this out and we turn on call zones, you'll see that anything within these green circles will spawn. Everything else will not spawn. And now you're wondering, well, how do I go attack stuff if it doesn't spawn in? Well, we'll get to that. But when you create a mission, let's say we created a seed flight to attack this SA2, it will get that circle around it as well. So you never have to worry about that. You also don't have to worry about aircraft because aircraft will always spawn in and do their mission. So as you play with this setting, you can get the results that you want. You know, you can put it up to 45, close this out, see how the circles got bigger. So you can play with that however you want. And it's pretty obvious why that helps, because this whole entire mission would spawn in normally, but anything that's not necessarily needed for that flight won't spawn in, which gives you a performance boost. So now that we're back in these settings, we're at the mission generator. We got all these in there the way we want. And we're going to cheat menu. So cheat menu can help you get out of some weird things. Let's say you thought you were going to capture a base and for some reason it didn't. Turning these on allow you to, click on that base and have the cheat capture, or for the front line, it gives you the cheat advance and cheat retreat. So it would just move the front line up a bit or capture this far. Sometimes it helps you get around bugs. Sometimes you might just want to try something different and say, hey, let's capture these 2 FARPs right off the bat and then play the mission like we already did half of it. It opens up options for you. You can also cheat with money if you think you need some extra money to get stuff done. The red ATO one, I don't really know what that does, to be honest with you. I figured it always showed something about the red side, but I don't know what that does. The Lua plugins, this is pretty cool. This is stuff that's been made to work with Retribution. You don't have to do any installation on your side. So CTLD has been implemented. This is how the air assault stuff is done. The only thing for CTLD right now is where transport helicopters can pick up troops and go drop them off near the enemy base. And then those troops will go to the center of that base and try to turn it blue. Or if it's the enemy team, try to turn your base red. Skynet. Skynet is an awesome script that allows the SAM sites and EWRs and all of that to talk to each other. And they will turn off their radars. They won't just sit there and be hot. They'll let the EWRs do the work and tell which SAM sites to turn on. And it makes it a lot more difficult for a player pilot. Always play with this because it is a lot of fun. The EWRS, this is, I think, still in Through the Inferno, where it just pops up a message in your top right corner showing, aircraft and distances that are near you. It can be kind of obnoxious, but it can be helpful for some players too. Kind of like a Overlord bot text type deal, but not quite. And then the other one that I always use is the splash damage. We all know, we've seen it. You drop a bomb near a tank or a vehicle and it doesn't kill it. Well, this fixes that. So within reason, it enhances bombs' performance. The CTLD stuff is pretty good, just standard on the plugin options. I leave it all as is. There is a JTAC script for the front lines where it automatically lasers and automatically smokes the target. If you're using FC3 aircraft, you might want to click this. That way the laser code is the same as your FC3 aircraft. And then the Skynet IADs, this stuff is just leave it. If you don't want people to be able to check this in the radio menu, all it does is do a pop-up that flashes and shows you the update of the SAM sites and EWRs. It's kind of like a debug thing where you can see if it's working or not. But that's pretty much it for the settings. So once you got all your settings done, I prefer to do a save. And I'll just save this as test A. So what are we looking at? We got this map here. This is your ruler. You can click and plan things out. You can hit escape. Sometimes it's a little finicky. Always run into this problem with the ruler. I guess we're just stuck here, huh? There we go. All right. So you can do some threat zone stuff if you want to know how far the enemy SAM sites can reach, but that's what these rings are for as well. You can show, get rid of the SAM threat rings. Anything with green under it is usually a SAM site of some sort to let you know that that thing's still alive. For instance, this SA2, if you were to take out its radar, it would show yellow, and then the ring should go away just to let you know that it can't fire. And then one other one, these all get rid of different things on the map. Help you get rid of ground clutter so you can get a better idea of what you're looking at. So when I look at this map, I want to know what's going on. In the beginning, I showed you that it had advanced IADs checked. So if I click enemy IADs network, it brings up these lines, and if you hover just right, it'll tell you what they are. Communication connection. So blue are comms, yellow is power. Now, depending how the mission is set up, you'll see this differently. But if a SAM site is connected to comms or power, if you take those out, it can't do what it needs to do. So this SA2, it's connected to this power station, this comms tower. If you kill this power station, this SAM site is dead too, because it has no power. Now, if you saw just a comms wire, that means that this one has its own power setting, so even if you kill the power station, you're not killing the SAM site. But in this case, if you kill this power station, you can see all these lines going off. This power station controls these two EWRs, this SAM site, and this SAM site. So, you could choose to do the old-fashioned way of brute force against a SAM site, or if you could take out this, you've just taken out 4 parts of the network. Or if you kill this tower, what would happen is this SAM site can't communicate with anything else, so it has to turn its radars on and be hot all the time. Now, when you come to attack a hot SAM site, there is logic involved if they can detect your harm. So if you just think you're going to shoot at a SAM site, you've got 2 problems. 1, the radar might not be on, and 2, if it is on, it can shut off if it detects your profile of the missile is, most likely a harm. So it makes it a little more difficult than just shooting at something that can't fire back from long range. So that covers that. And then you'll see that there's a command center back here. This command center is what's responsible for all of this to be able to talk to each other. So if you were able to somehow get back here and kill this command center, all of the network cannot communicate with each other. That means every single SAM site would have to go hot to defend itself, which would make it open to harm attacks and just being spotted, period. And this particular mission, like, wow, there's a lot going on. How do I figure out what's happening? Well, you could turn off pretty much everything, leave air defenses on, and take a look. just a quick hover, you can tell that these are all short-range SAMs in AAA. We got an SA-10, SA-2, SA-11, SA-2, SA-11, SA-6, SA-2. Short range, short range, short range, short range, and another flak battery. So now that you know that, turn all this stuff back on. You know, this big threat ring is an SA-10, but there's a lot of terrain. You can see terrain. So just flying in here probably isn't going to get the SA-10 to shoot at you. But, you know, the closer you get, it's going to decide that you're more interesting, and it might turn its radar on and start firing. So you have to plan for how you want to do this. Now, most people who are starting out probably don't want to do any of that thinking. You probably just want to get in there and have a good time. So all you have to do now that we did the new game wizard and the settings, all you need to do is hit begin campaign. Because of the settings that we picked where it automatically does everything for us, okay, it's going to not only buy all the aircraft and frontline units we need, it's going to schedule us flights. And remember how I said 30 minutes on that slider? Well, look at this. Our time on targets for our flights are all pretty much under an hour. Further up we go, the lower they are. That's going to be the same for the enemy. And if you click on this little guy, it'll show you all the red flight plans. Now, some other things you can look at here is the budget. This will show you all of your finances on how you're making money. You can click on Intel here. This will show economy information. It'll show all your aircraft. And it'll show all your ground forces. If you click enemy, it'll show you enemy's information. If we come over to air wing, make this bigger, this is where it shows you all your squadrons. And let's see, we made that Huey squadron, right? Look at this. We got 2 pilots named after me. And then we got the rest of them. So you can see as the pilots die, you know, it would show dead. It would show you how many missions. It showed dead. The send on leave stuff is just, don't worry about it because it's not really implemented to do anything yet. You can hit convert to player. This just makes them a player slot instead of an AI slot, but you can do that a different way, and I'll show you that. But you can come over to inventory, and you can show all the flights that are going to happen for your guys. A lot of information there, but also you can get intel on your enemy. So they're going to have a bunch of MiG-21s doing bar cap, and that is all. They are not sending anything out to do strikes. So you can expect, this looks like a lot of bar cap, right? But the bar cap's going to be set to defend each base that they got. So most of the bar cap's going to be back here, while some of it might venture out forward. Just some information for you. Now, like I said, most players don't want to do all that planning. So you just hit begin campaign and you see this nonsense. It's like, oh my god, what am I looking at? Well, we could take a look. You know, we got AWACS, we got a refueler, got some bar cap going up. We got some A10C Thunderbolts going out there with some tar cap cover. We got some F-16s doing deed. A couple F-16s doing escort. Couple A-10s here. And this looks really messy, so let's uncheck all blue flight plans and just check selected. So let's say that you're an A-10C pilot, or any pilot for that matter. Let's say F-18 pilot. You want to fly one of these. You don't want to plan these out, but you want to fly one of these. So what you do is you find one that you like. This one is going to be an F-18 flight that's tasked to kill these BTRs. So you double click on this. Pops up this screen. It says aircraft count, squadron. It has all the pilots listed. The startup type. Now in Retribution here, you need to be the pilot leader. Okay, so yeah, you can check player as the wingman. but you need to be the leader. Okay. And sometimes having an AI co-pilot, an AI wingman isn't the best thing ever. We all know that that can be stupid sometimes. Plus, do you really need an AI wingman to kill those 4 vehicles? Probably not. So you check the box to make yourself the player, and then you drop down to aircraft count 1, so you don't have to worry about a wingman. Come over to payload. Well, you could change that here. Yeah, that's not a problem. But you also can change it in game when you get in your cockpit. The only reason to change it here would be if you're not going to start up at, taxi time or at startup time and you might be spawning in the air, then you might want to change this. And you just do custom loadout and then you can change it up. Or you can try one of these provided options here. But if you don't want it, you can just do the BAI, leave that as is. You can go to your waypoints and you can see what your waypoints are going to be. These are also going to be in an in-game kneeboard. Let's say you don't think you're that great of a pilot, so instead of having to make other target waypoints, you could try to recreate it as a strike flight. But it did make it a strike flight, but it didn't give you all the targets. And what I mean by that is if we wanted to manually do this one, right, we could hit right click, delete. We can right click on this one. I'm sorry. What we're going to do here is double click on Escort Turkey, strike, F18, 1 slot, player, and you could call this your name so it's easier for you to find your stuff and hit create. And now if we look at the waypoints, you've got a strike waypoint for every single unit. Now you could just go over there and drop 4 JDAMs on each waypoint and you win the day. So there's a lot of options in there. The other thing you'll notice is your time on target is 41 minutes into the mission. That means 9:41 is when you're expected to blow that up. Maybe you don't want to wait till 9:41. So you can check this box and go ASAP. This means this is the fastest your escort can meet up with you and you guys can go hit that objective. It may or may not be true. You could probably just start up your aircraft and bolt out there in the first 10 minutes and blow it up. But this is for mission planning. Okay. And what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to hit done. And I'm going to open up my Discord here and just show you what those kneeboards look like. So those kneeboards will have your name at the top. If you type in the name, like I did, it would say Holy Orange Juice. Shows you all your information about your airfield. It shows your flight plan. It shows you your waypoints. It shows you your departure time from your hold. This is how you're going to meet your time on target if you choose to. If you want to fly to your escort and have your escort follow you in, you need to fly up to your hold point, and then you need to wait until that time. You can watch the F10 menu. You can watch your cockpit timer. Now, just a quick word of warning. The F10 map time and your cockpit time might be different due to local and Zulu time, but you don't need to worry about the hour. You just need to worry about the minutes because we set this up with that that mission slider down to 30, where you're only planning to fly for an hour. Also tells you how much fuel you need, so make sure you conserve fuel. It gives you laser codes and stuff to deconflict, your weather information. It'll give you a second kneeboard showing your call sign, your comm ladders, your flight. So if you did have a wingman, this is the frequency you'd use to talk to him. Of course, if you have easy comms on, you don't have to worry about any of this. The JTAC frequency and laser code, but he does it automatically, so you don't ever have to talk to him unless you want to. And then you'll have a target information. This is a deed target, so it's showing the harm codes. It's showing all of this information, but it's not showing waypoint numbers because a deed waypoint doesn't give you waypoint numbers. Only strike flights will do that. So that's all there is on that kind of stuff. So let's take a look at calling to see what it does now. Look at all of that. Since we've got targets, and we can put the all blue targets on there, see everywhere that a blue guy is going to go shoot at has the zone around it, so it doesn't spawn in. I mean, so it does spawn in. Anything in these circles spawn in. But for instance, out here, this SA-10 is not going to spawn in. So you could cheat, right? None of this stuff is going to spawn in. So if you flew too far in, you don't have an SA-10 to worry about. So don't cheat yourself. Don't cheat the game. Use it as a way to get things to not spawn in that don't need to spawn in and just have a good time. So you pick one of these, you set the time on target, everything's great. You just want to go ahead and fly now. Perfect. Uh, you just hit take off. Okay. Well, let's say you had another buddy. Let's say he's hell. Let's say he flies the F-15. You can just come in here, player, and you are good to go. So now you and your buddy, you're gonna be escorted by him, and you're just gonna go in there and have a good time. Well, let's say you wanted to make something manually. Let's say you're just not happy with any of this, right? So what you do, and this is what I do. Okay, I come in here, I click on the bottom, and I just cancel them all. I personally like to plan everything. I'm going to turn off these calling zones. I come in here, I right click, add flight. This is my AWACS. I hit good to go. I do it again for the refueler. And I do this pretty quick. Okay, I've been doing this a while. I do all of our planning for Rear Liberation. All right, we got some bar cap because we need some bar cap. All right, we got a couple bar cap flights up. We're going to need some CAS because if we click on the enemy FARP, we can see they got 41 ground units. Okay, if we click on ours, we can hit ground forces. We can see that they purchased everything for us. We could purchase a couple more, but these won't come in till next turn. Uh, the frontline operations here, you can set the different modes. Defensive, they'll pretty much hold still. Aggressive, not too sure what that does. I don't really use it. Retreat, that's pretty obvious. They try to get farther back. Breakthrough is they try to push through. So they want to push through the lines, and if there's a base nearby, they'll drive to the middle of that base to try to capture it. Elimination, they'll target the nearest three groups. Each individual group will try to target enemy three groups. And ambush, I believe, is just like defensive, but I'm pretty sure they put it in places where the enemy is going to drive through. So you've got all these units. Some of these anti-air units are good too because they'll sit behind the main units and give them protection. Same thing with trying to buy units. Let's say we wanted to fly a couple MI8s. Now these won't come in till next turn, but you can also get a history and a picture of the aircraft. A couple Hueys. So this is how you buy stuff manually when you don't set it to automatic. Tells you how many aircraft your airbase can hold, how many you've purchased, how many are currently present. Shows you all the information up here. It includes the factory can produce units. This one's important because if you want to uh, buy ground forces, they have to come from a factory. So if you didn't have a factory here, they would have to come from a base that did, and it can take a turn. It can take multiple turns depending how far it is. Okay, it also tells you that the runway is operational, and it tells you how many ammo depots are available. That's one of the things that sets the number of frontline units. But all right, back to what we were talking about here. We're going to set some CAS up. Okay, a couple A10s. Should be more than plenty. But we want to take out this AAA site, so we're going to send a couple of 18s to do that. Set them to deed. And as you play with the AI's capabilities of mission types, you'll see what helps. A strike is typically done against static. So if you had them do a strike against a tank group and they miss and the tank groups start moving around, well, they're going to miss. Deed is more of kill that particular site, do what you need to do, and it's targeting the actual units. Seed is suppression, so like harm stuff, just kind of stop them from getting shot at. So we'll put a seed escort flight with these guys. That way, if anything targets them with radar, they'll try to shoot at those radars. All right, so we got some seat escorts. Let's get some of these EWRs offline. We'll send just a one tornado after that. We can have a strike down here. Send a JF-17 after that, and we could go down here. Let's see, what did they give us? What did they buy for us? Oh, they bought us some. You know, we'll put a couple F-15Es doing deed, and then we can do a seed escort with some 18s. Hopefully, suppress that radar if they do shoot on our F-15Es. And actually, since they're going so far down there, double click here to re-edit this. I think I'll give them an escort. Give them a couple 14s as escort. Okay. And there's all kinds of tactics. I'm just playing around here just to show you how to set up this manually. It's really not bad. But you got to think your mission's going to go for an hour. So these F-15s patrolling for an hour, they're going to be low on fuel. So what I typically like to do is move them up. Okay. You move this yellow racetrack. You see this? So I'm going to move them up just outside of SAM range. And I'm going to bring the back end up all the way together. That way this patrol ring is a lot tighter. I'm also going to double click on here and I'm going to tell them, hey, I don't really need you in the air till 20 minutes in. Well, I don't need you on time on target till 20 minutes. And then I'm going to do the same thing with these guys. But you notice how I have racetrack end, racetrack start, racetrack end? Well, we're going to bring those guys the opposite. We're going to put the end first and then the start. That way they're doing opposite racetrack patterns. And we also need to tell these guys, hey, you know what? We probably don't need you till about 25 minutes in. Perfect. And then, just to be safe, I'll put a group of 14s and I'll tell them to come in at 30-minute mark. And I'll move their stuff in as well. That way, when all the aircraft are coming back to retreat and land, they've got some cover. So get rid of all that flight plan stuff so we can see. We've got Hawksight, we got an Avenger team, NASAMS, Patriot, Patriot, Patriot. So let's say we want to swap this out. We can hit buy and replace, and then we can pick something. Let's say we want a NASAM battery. Well, let's say we want a NASAM battery with like 8 launchers, and we want some Avengers. We want 2 Avengers with that. Some of this stuff you can change, some of it you can't. So now we got a big NASAM battery here. Yeah. So that's good for us. And these other icons here, they're tech hangers. They're just stuff that's making you money. Some of them are ammo depots. This is what allows you to put your frontline units out. So once you're satisfied, once you have a mission, just go ahead, double check, and save that. And when you hit takeoff, it's going to say, wait a minute, you didn't put any player flights. Like, oh yeah, duh, I forgot. I want to actually do something. So I'm going to make myself have this tank group strike with an F-16 player, Oscar Juliet. There you go. Now I have something to do. Cool. I hit takeoff again. Boom, you're cleared for takeoff. And then there's just a bunch of extra information here. If you're playing this on your personal machine, when you load up the mission, in the top right hand corner, you know how DCS does text messages. If it has a big blinking message saying, hey, stop the mission, it's not working, that's where that mission scripting Lua file was coming from. And sometimes between updates, you might just have to replace this file, even though it's the same exact file. I don't know what causes that, because all this is doing is blocking this out. So it's not really doing anything crazy, okay? But sometimes you'll just have to pull it from the scripts file and put it back over there. and you're good to go. Once you're done playing your mission, so right now you go into DCS, you open this up in the mission editor, and that's your chance to change the weather if you don't like it. If you don't like the weather or winds, that's your time to change it. You just save and hit the green button and go straight into the mission. You fly your mission, and um, you just go for it. You just have a good time. And once you're done, let's say you're just the hour's coming up, or you've done your flight and you don't want to wait anymore, you can just hit escape and exit, and Retribution will automatically pull that data. And another screen will pop up showing you how many units were killed and all of that. And you can choose to abort or you can choose to accept. Like in this case, I'm going to abort. Okay. And then I'm going to load my last save, and that reset the timeline. Okay. And uh, since I had at startup time, it only bumped me to 901. Okay. Now, since I didn't save it again after that, I have to remake my strike. So I'm going to remake my strike. And I always have a habit of clicking the first guy. The reason being is when you turn a name to player slot, they come to the top. So if I come to the top, I usually always get a player pilot instead of just keep making player pilots. So Oscar Juliet has a slot. I'm going to save this. But because my startup time is at the beginning of the mission, what I could do is I could do this. I could do 59, 59. This is just my magical number that I use. Something I created because it always seemed to work. And it was like my code word to myself, like, okay, I'm using first contact. Now watch the timer. Boom. We only made it 12 minutes. No big deal. But we did make it farther than we would otherwise. And since I'm just a strike flight by myself with no escorts or anything, I just jump in my plane, I start that up, and I go to my target and I have a good time. I don't have to worry about reading my kneeboards and meeting up with people. I just do what I want to do, come back and land, let the AI finish if I want or not, and just escape and quit, and Retribution will pick it up from there. Hopefully that's covered pretty much everything anybody will ever need regarding this situation. Um, you can always come to a rerun liberation event. You're going to find very quickly that DCS AI is horrible. Um, a lot of things that go wrong are not because of retribution. They do have a lot of workarounds to try to make stuff work, and they do a good job getting that done. But you just can't beat playing with player pilots. And since we don't run things like a hardcore squadron, as long as you can fly your plane and deploy weapons, you are going to fit right in. Uh, very casual, very fun. No commitment needed. We run several sorties a night, so if you can make one of those, you just jump on in and leave when you can't stay any longer. So it's a good time. I hope to make some more tutorials showing the back end of things, like how to edit missions and edit the files and stuff like that to customize it to your needs. It's kind of how our group started. So, with all that said, I hope I covered it all. If you have any questions, go ahead, put those down in the comments. Appreciate all of you watching my videos, especially my previous tutorials. Take it easy.